Welcome everybody to the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee for our last meeting of the municipal year. As normal, I have the normal essay to read. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, follow me. The premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escapes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay. Can I first have any appointments of substitutes? I think we have a few.
Chair, yes, as far as this evening's meeting is concerned, Karen Lewing is subbing for Tor Pingree tonight. We've also had apologies from James Stanley.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No? No public representations tonight? No. Oh, wow. Minutes of the previous meeting, is it your wish they be signed as a truish record? Everybody happy? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5 then. Fundraising in the street by direct debit, and I turn to Mr McManaman.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members, this is an information report to give you an update on a recent review that has taken place with the Council's site management agreement, which we have in place with the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. It's all in relation to charitable street collections and direct debit street collectors in particular. Now, direct debit street collecting is a type of charitable collections where people sign up to a direct debit agreement on the high street and pledge to give money to particular charities, and there's a whole raft of charities. Now, this particular activity, unlike your cash street collections, isn't actually regulated by legislation. There's no laws saying how this should happen or whether it should happen or even whether it can be controlled. So if we cast our minds back to 2016, I'm just mindful that I'm not sure that any of the members except yourself, Councillor or Chair, were privy to the introduction of the original site management agreement. There were concerns which were raised by councillors, members of the public, because the high street was awash with street collectors. You'd run the gauntlet on any day of the week, walking up and down the high street and being pestered by people trying to sign you up to all sorts of charitable organisations. So we looked at ways of how this could be controlled. And the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, which is an organisation which monitors the activity of direct debit street collectors and has a number of members, had in place a site management agreement. So it's a voluntary arrangement which the council signs up to by negotiation to put in some sort of regulation, so to control the activities of the street collections so that they don't cause a nuisance. You know, members of the public can walk through the high street and avoid them if they wanted to. And that's what we did. So back in 2016, we sat down and we put together the site management agreement. Now, since that time, it's worked well. The complaints received by the council, or certainly our office and through councillors, stopped. We didn't get any. I'm sure there are still sort of anecdotal complaints of members of the public, you know, when you talk to them, because they're still there and people take umbrage of being approached. So what we've done is tried to minimise the impact by having this agreement in place. Now, we met with the head of fundraising, Nick Henry, very recently with the town centre management team, and we reviewed the agreements. We looked at it, we looked at the times, we looked at the days, and it was felt that it was working well. So very minimal changes were made. The changes that were made were the plan. So we've introduced a new plan, which is attached as well as the site management agreement as well, which sort of simplifies it. It's one collection location, which is the High Street, with an exclusion zone outside of the Guildhall. We've updated terminology. It's a standard template with it personalised to Worcester City, so it's attached for information. So this is something which has happened. The agreement has been updated, it's been signed off by the head of service, and it's just been presented purely as an information item so that you're aware of what's happening in the city, so what the council has actually signed up to. I'm not sure if there's anything further I need to say. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. But yes, the report is fairly self-explanatory, and the agreement is attached for information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niall. I think it's a good report, very clear what's happened. I was certainly hit when we first introduced this, and it was a serious issue in the Worcester High Street prior to 2016. You literally could not walk between shops without being stopped and pestered to ask a direct debit mandate. So I think this has actually worked and is working well, and I'm pleased it's been renewed. Are there any questions or comments from anybody? No, I do think the problem we have to address now is not so much this, but it's door-to-door charitable collections where people are taking advantage of old age pensioners and others, and potentially vulnerable people in the public out there in their own homes. And I think we have made a request as Chair and Vice Chair for some trading standard stickers to be available in the Guildhall for anybody who may want them, so they can stick them on the windows and say, don't call here unless you've got identification. Councillor Lawrence.
Through you, Chair. As well, would this apply to, I walked into my local co-op and there was one just inside the door. Is that all just to do with the supermarket? They've got permission?
Yeah, unfortunately, when it's on private property, again, neither regulations sort of apply. So if it's a cash collection, they can do it without regulation. If it's direct debit, they can do it anyway. So what tends to happen is the businesses pledge to have charitable organisations on their premises, and you'll find it happens. It used to be very popular. You don't see it as much these days, but they're supposed to stay on the curtilage of the actually on the premises and not step over this sort of curtilage. So you will see it in doorways and actually on premises, but yeah, unfortunately, it can't be regulated by the council.
The recommendations is for the report to be noted. Are we happy to do so? We are, thank you. Moving to agenda item 6, and it's Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this report looks at the proposal to introduce mandatory safeguarding training for Hackney Carriage and private hire licence holders. I'm sure you've all been through the report, so I will only just highlight the most pertinent points in the paper for your consideration. In September 2022, the Council introduced a new draft Hackney Carriage and private hire licensing policy. And this was in response to the Department for Transport's guidance under the statutory taxi and private hire standards. And the theme of this, of the DFT, the whole point of the DFT bringing these in line was actually safeguarding. As part of the changes implemented by the Council was to introduce a competency certificate for all new drivers, but this was only for the new drivers, and this certificate comprises of a whole day of training on safeguarding, disability, equality, and many other aspects of training deemed necessary for licence holders to undertake being a good licensed driver. Now, any other training for the existing drivers is purely voluntary. Therefore, we now have licensed drivers that are either trained through the competence certificate, the new drivers, but also drivers that are existing drivers that have had no safeguarding training or very limited safeguarding training. We attempted to look at this in 2018, and licensing officers worked with partners across the county and offered a programme of child exploitation training for all taxi drivers. And the take-up across the county was quite good. It was around 75%. However, in Worcester alone, there were 175 drivers that attended the training out of a possible 350. Therefore, there are still quite a high number that haven't had any safeguarding training at all, or longer than 5 years ago. Research by officers has found that a lot of local authorities and neighbouring local authorities took the opportunity with the taxi standards to make safeguarding training mandatory. We at that point didn't feel it was necessary because there's no intelligence or data to say that actually we needed to do that. However, on reflection, officers have looked at this and taken feedback from drivers. Our officers have actually sat in the training as well. And the training is very, very good, and the feedback from drivers have actually taken and undertaken the training has been really positive. So our proposal is that actually we think that to cause less disruption for the drivers and for all drivers to have safeguarding training, that we think that drivers should actually, on renewal, have some safeguarding training or some form of safeguarding training. And if you look at Appendix 1 in the paper, you'll see that what we've actually put in is that this would be effective from the 1st of January 2025, which actually we say that we'd go out and consult for 12 weeks. It would come back to this committee in around September, and then that gives enough time to do any comms and to let drivers know and to actually undertake the initial safeguarding training for those that are renewing beyond January 2025. Currently, the cost of the competency certificate is £100. Now, we as officers know that there will be a cost to this for drivers, but we've been actually working with the training provider who actually undertakes the competency certificate at the moment to try and get the best possible cost and keep the cost as a minimum for drivers. But we'd hope that you understand that the value would actually exceed the cost proposed there. We've been negotiating with the trainer, and the trainer's saying it's around at the £20 mark. But those are still conversations that we as officers are having. The report does set out some alternatives, but our preferred option is actually for the committee to agree a 12-week public consultation exercise on the proposal of a mandatory safeguarding training through that process, and those that don't undertake it would actually not be revoked but suspended until a date that actually they would undertake it going forward. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, Stephen.
I've got 3 questions, if I may. First one is safeguarding training. I'm not completely sure what that actually means. I don't know if you could spend 2 minutes explaining what that training actually is and what it would cover. That's the first question. The second question is, I think it's a really good idea what you're doing, and I fully support it. I'm just wondering, though, that if we start it in January 2025 and it's just for renewals after that point, if somebody renews their licence in December 2024, it could be 3 years before we get everybody captured in the system. So that's my second question. And the third question is, we don't want to create a disincentive for people to licence here in Worcester. So will you also be doing hopefully a standardisation process with Wychavon and Malvern, at least for local councils, to make sure that they're also on board and we have some sort of level of standardisation as well?
Yeah, if I can answer the last 2 questions, and I believe Nyla's probably attended the safeguarding training that the taxis undertake. But so I'll let Nyla answer the first one. Yes, we are putting the same report through all of the committees across the county, and we're hoping that every committee would agree to the same. Second question, yes, it is likely that it is another 3 years until they have that training. And go on, Lloyd.
I was sorry, Chair. I was just going to say, whatever time of the year we introduce it, there will be a chance that people will miss the cut-off. I think the important thing for us is, and taking some lessons from what we've done this year, linked to savings programmes, is to make sure that we communicate this really, really well. Everybody's aware of what it is, what it means, what's required of them, and we can't be accused of not being clear. So I think the preference of officers is to give us that time to be able to embed it properly, roll it out properly. And unfortunately, if that means it's missing a few, albeit that's not perfect, I think whatever stage of the year, there will be that gap.
Yes, so when it comes to the actual training itself, the awareness training, it tends to focus on child exploitation and protection of vulnerable persons. So the idea being that the driver will be able to identify any issues in their vehicle, because as we know, they will be transporting people who probably fall into this category. So it's really them identifying the people in the back of their vehicle and knowing the signs, where to report, and what to do at the time, if appropriate. It covers a sort of a whole raft of sort of safeguarding elements, but that's the main areas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it's a very welcome move forward. I presumably then, given the answer to Councillor Stevens' previous questions, it'll be 3 years before we have 100% fleet knowledge of this. Okay, thank you.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, is any of the safeguard, I know it's concentrating on children, would it also include vulnerable adults and maybe victims of domestic violence? Because I'm quite concerned about, yeah, that's kind of my main point, really.
Yeah, yes, it does. I mean, it focuses on sort of women and vulnerable persons, so it sort of covers every element. But yeah, most of the safeguarding in the first report from the taxi standards came out of the Rotherham cases. So yes, the child sexual exploitation was a big part of it, but no, it does cover those other areas.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased that our city hasn't had an issue, and I think it's much better that we head it off rather than react to an incident that's happened, which is very unfortunate. I think it's much better to proactively work to prevent.
Thank you. Councillor Cross?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, and very keen for a level playing field on this. Couple of questions, please. One quick one, para 2.16, just clarification as to what is meant by the training being applied on a cost recovery basis, just exactly what that means. And also a question about, in terms of our drivers, do we have information as to how many are also licensed in another authority? I understand for long distance runs, taxi drivers have to be licensed in both, if they want to be doing a long run and then picking up a return fare home. Is that the case, or is that a misconception?
Yeah, just very quickly. Yeah, no, they only need to be licensed for the one local authority for that sort of scenario that you've put forward. A return journey, it's where the booking's taken. So they wouldn't have to be licensed in every local authority in which they work. Yes, some are licensed with other local authorities, and certainly we have the information of the ones within Worcestershire, because we're in the unique position that we are Worcestershire Regulatory Services, and we hold all of that data. It's quite expensive to get licenses, so they don't tend to license with lots of different authorities just so that they can sort of widen their work or their opportunity for contracts. So they don't tend to have too many, but there are one or two that have them with other authorities. And as I say, sort of certainly within Worcestershire, we know which ones they are, and we can provide that information.
Yeah, so in terms of cost recovery, that means that they wouldn't make a profit, so they would be only charging for how much it actually costs to undertake that work. Our provider is actually another local authority, so they would try to keep the cost as minimal as possible.
I have received some representation from drivers querying why they need to have a new extra financial burden upon them. But quite frankly, I think it's a necessary burden, and it's for their own protection as much as it is for the public, especially with the amount of school children who are being passengered to school and back. So the recommendation is there in front of us for a consultation to take place, and we'll get the final outcome of the price for the training in September, will we? Are we happy with that as a recommendation? Everybody seems to be happy. Well done. Thank you. And we now move on to real-time air monitoring. And Adrian, a small brief report from yourself on progress.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an update report from the December meeting. You recall we planned some locations that, to tell you where they were going to be fitted, and I'm pleased to report now that in Worcester, they are all now fitted on lampposts. So there are 10 located at various locations that are all reported on the December report. I'd encourage you to go back and look at that if you need to remind yourself of that. Yeah, they were fitted just over a month and a half ago now, in the middle of January, and have been gathering data for that. And we have received confirmation from the supplier about the compliance data for them. We've received the commissioning information. We've paid them for them, and they're all working. The data we get on a feed, which I'm in the process of looking at the public-facing element of that to be published. In the meantime, paragraph 3.3 of my report, we have launched a behaviour change survey, and I see this as being quite key really to the public-facing element of the portal to get information from the public in Worcester and the wider Worcestershire about their understanding of air quality, and then the behaviour change actions that we need to put in place following the implementation of these monitors. The survey was launched on the 12th of February, so about 3 weeks ago, and is running for a 3-month period and ends on the 12th of May, so just after the election. And then my plan is to publish the public-facing portal on our website at that time. Yes, and that will be available on our short link there to our website. I can say at this stage on the behaviour change survey, we've had a lot of interest from the initial tranche of press releases, and thank you to Worcester City Council for publishing it on the press feed as well as a press release, I think quite early in the process, which I'm grateful for, and that's resulted in, we've already got well over 800 responses from across the county, but I'm looking for numbers in the thousands rather than the hundreds, to be honest, to give us that broad range of data in terms of people's understanding from a cross-section of the community to enable us to give a targeted approach to how we're going to improve air quality. Any questions?
Any questions from anybody? You've shocked them into submission. Oh, then maybe you haven't. Councillor Cross.
Not a question, really, but just a hearty thanks about this really important topic, and look forward to it being online and as soon as possible. So, thank you.
And we have requested an updated every licensing meeting in the future while the work is going on. Adrian, thank you very much for your report, and look forward to a further updated report next time, which should be fun. Thank you very much indeed. I now turn to Nick Kay, who is coming to tell us all about Martin's Law. For a brief warning, this is also going, I believe, to the PED committee next week. It covers a number of committee responsibilities, and we are a bit restricted at the moment for not really knowing how far the legislation is going to go. So there's an information report at this stage, and I'm sure Nick will be able to answer any questions which you may have, including the ones he doesn't know the answer to.
Microphone,
Yes.
which was the problem. So there you go.
Yes.
So there
I'll speak it up loud to get you prepared. Over to you, Nick. Anything else you want to add to the report?
Not really, just that, thank you, Chair, that this was an information report and it's hopefully will raise your awareness of the potential legislation that is coming forwards. But we should be mindful that it is a draft bill at the moment. It's going through parliamentary process and the detail is still to be confirmed. If and when the bill becomes legislation, we are expecting significant sort of like guidance to be made available prior to implementation on this. But I'll just go quickly through the report if you'll allow me. Obviously, Section 2 sets out the background for the draft bill and the necessity going forwards for that. Section 3 identifies, as it's proposed in the draft bill, the primary elements, such as the type of premises to be covered. There is Schedule 1 of the draft bill, which includes some more detail, but again, that could all well potentially change. We also have sort of like an approach where it's a two-tiered approach, where we have a standard tier where the capacity of premises from 100 to 799 of public access is the standard tier, and then the enhanced tier is when it goes over 800 capacity. And there will obviously be further requirements for those larger premises coming forwards. We do actually have we say nationally, there is an additional consultation being undertaken at the moment with regard to the standard tier, because obviously going through the parliamentary process, there was obviously some concerns raised by the Home Affairs Select Committee about the potential burden on businesses going forwards with regard to the standard tier. So that's open. I think it's the 18th of March is when the consultation. So the more that people that can respond, the better, because obviously it gets the views through. And then also, as part of the draft bill, there is actually going to be a regulator created to promote and enforce the new legislation. Again, we don't know who that will fall upon and if that will be a new organisation or will go to an existing organisation. That's yet to be sort of confirmed. The Section 4 just looks at the potential implications. The City Council, we are landowner, premises owners, so there will be an implication with regard to that. And also as part of a requirement as our local authority. And potentially there will be implications with regard to licensing, because in Schedule 3 of the draft report, there is actually a proposal to partly amend the Licensing Act, and it's about requiring to keep a register and just to insert the need for a terrorism protection statement within that. Obviously, the detail will be, everything will be as part of the detail going forwards. Section 5, yeah, that just looks at how the City Council and what the City Council have been undertaking within this subject matter in preparation of the draft bill, and also other requirements and responsibilities that we do have. We've been tending to focus on training and engaging with those specialist organisations at the national level, and also with the counter-terrorism police. So we are in a reasonable position as an authority, but there's always more once the detail becomes available. So hopefully that's a brief introduction, and I'll answer any questions if I possibly can.
Thank you, Nick. Just two comments from me. First of all, I'm assuming when we have more information about this, there'll be further reports back to committee, especially regarding any financial implications and on new duties for the local authority. So that will eventually be coming back to committee.
Yes. As soon as the information is available, then we will sort of like keep committees up to date with that.
And second question from me is, can you confirm there are a number of exemptions to this legislation, aren't there? And I'm sure you can briefly outline what they may be.
They are within Schedule 1, and of the draft, and that there are a number of exemptions, and I'm just scrolling through to section 1, and it tends to be yeah, I mean, where there's other, so we say for the, it's proposed in the draft bill that transport modes and infrastructure areas which are covered by different legislation will be not party to this, because there will be other sort of legislation in place. So it doesn't override those particular sort of existing legislation.
Places of worship are exempted, isn't it?
Well, because obviously places of worship, as it's proposed at the moment, they will be looked at as a standard tier, even though they may well fall outside of fall into the enhanced tier. But again, this is all draft legislation, and we have to wait until that detail is made available.
Councillor Lawrence, and I saw somebody else's hand.
Thank you, Chair. As with the safeguarding, I think, again, it's much better that we're looking forward to prevent a terrorist attack in the city. We don't want that sort of thing, and that we be protecting and preparing is very good. I'm wondering, it talks about venue size, but would it be event size at that venue? So say you're at Six Ways and it's an 800, but you're only running a small event, will it still apply, or is it blanket to the venue size?
Sorry, I think that's where the detail will come forward.
Right. Yeah.
Because obviously, as you indicate, some premises, some venues will have a higher capacity, but they will have had to go through the process in any case of doing the enhanced tier. So they will be covered, but as event organisers, there will be a requirement, you would imagine, for them to sort of take their own requirements into account.
Yeah, because, I mean, somebody could use a smaller event just to stealthily get in and leave something for a bigger event. So I think it's still important. But I was wondering, is this going to be more of an emphasis on sort of physical systems that are going to be put in place, or are we looking about using intelligence to prevent?
It's a very, what I would say is that this is, shall we say, the UK counter-terrorism strategy is the contest sort of strategy, and that was updated October 23. And it requires, it looks at 4 pillars, shall we say, the prevent, the pursue, the protect, and the prepare. I would suggest that this is in towards the protect and the prepare side of those pillars, and it's not so much, it includes physical, but it's also about training of staff and making sure that those staff are aware of procedures so should an incident occur.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope we don't need it.
Do we have any idea when it might come in? Because obviously some events are booked up a year, maybe even 2 years ahead to get their venues booked and whatever, and there'll be some financial implications, I guess, for this. Just wondered, for example, things like the Worcester Show or the Victorian Fair and things like that. When will this actually come in?
It's going through parliamentary process, and obviously there will be. It's dependent on Parliament sort of debating this and it going through that process. So that's why it's if a sort of election is called, then time may run out. But obviously, as it stands at the moment, it's looking to go through this year's parliamentary process. There is strong indications that obviously with any new legislation, there is an implementation period, and Home Office civil servants are indicating that there will be a relatively lengthy period for implementation because of the additional responsibilities, requirements coming forwards. Yep.
Councillor Hodgson?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's an interesting piece of law, this, and obviously it's simply relating back to a lack of awareness of what a suspicious activity looks like in terms of a terrorist thing. And I reckon It's obviously in terms of how this actually gets implemented, because it's very sketchy at the moment. I'm just thinking, in my day job role, I work for a major supermarket chain, and I guess that they will probably then have to have some policy to brief their store managers and supervisors and that, so that they can recognise if somebody is behaving suspiciously around a large retail premise, for example. And I would guess whether industry is the right word to describe it, but there will be, at some point, set training providers, set courses who will be able to provide the advice to councils and businesses and that, in terms of how to make this legislation actually work.
Yes, yeah. I mean that there will be. What I would suggest is that retail will be one of those business sectors which will be covered as part of this legislation, as we take it at this moment. And there will be, obviously, training opportunities coming forwards. The City Council, we do engage very often with West Mercia's counter-terrorism security advisors, and they are the experts in the field, and we have a very good working relationship with those as it stands at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for the brief introduction. Obviously, you'll come back to us when we know more on what kind of roles and responsibilities and burdens we have to have as a local authority, and we look forward to that.
No, and thank you for allowing me to introduce this subject to you.
I'm sorry to have kept you so long. There being no other business, can I wish you a safe journey home, and thank you for your attendance tonight. It's 5:20 to 8. Meeting over.